Xavier's Anecdote 1, A Special Vacation. Chapter 1, Frank's Summer Homework. Write an essay titled, "When I grow up, I want to be a blank," to understand the kind of job you want to do. After reading his son's homework assignment for the summer vacation, Ulysses asks, "What do you want to be when you grow up, Frankie?" 7-year-old Frank's eyes sparkle. "I want to be a deep space hunter," he jumps up and down. "I'm going to defeat wanderers like this. Swish, swish, swish. They're so awesome." Ulysses looks a little surprised. "Really?" "Really." Smiling, Ulysses pulls his son into his lap. "I have a friend who's a deep space hunter. In fact, he is the best of the best. Do you want to go to his place and have him teach you how to become one?" "The best of the best? What kind of hunter is he? The hunters in the cartoons are already really cool. They wear shiny outfits with super cool weapons. They travel to every corner of the city, flying across the sky, and they can run on walls. A single move is enough to amaze the whole world. If there's a hunter better than them, doesn't that mean he'd be cooler?" Following Dad to his old friend's house, Frank watches as the door opens. He's filled with longing and anticipation. Then, he's stunned. The man inside is wearing a pair of white slippers and regular pajama pants. There was no shiny, golden outfit. He didn't transform. He wore normal clothes, and he has a lopsided sleeping mask with stars on it. He still looks a little tired after yawning. This person is a deep space hunter? He talks to Dad, but Frank doesn't pay any attention. He could see the question mark on the man's face. It changed to an exclamation mark and then ellipsis. After that, he kneels down to look at Frank in the eye. "Hello, my name is Xavier." His voice. It doesn't seem like he would shout out a catchphrase. Frank's heart beats frantically in his chest. He grabs the hem of his father's shirt and says, "I'm Frank." He looks at Xavier's hair. "Grandpa?" But looking at Xavier's face, he's unsure. "Uncle?" Xavier lowers his head, scratching his neck. "Xavier is good enough." Chapter 2, A Deep Space Hunter's Home. Dad drives away not long after, leaving Frank alone with Xavier. Xavier closes the door and takes Frank's tiny suitcase inside. Frank hurries after him, curiously looking around. This is the house of a deep space hunter. Would he have an entire wall filled with weapons and bombs? What about tiny robots that fly around everywhere? Would there be a sleeping pod as big as the room? After walking around, Frank realizes that Xavier doesn't have any of these. "Mr. Xavier, where's your armory?" Xavier is pressing some buttons on his juicer. Frank's question causes him to mess up, so he presses cancel and restarts the process. "I don't have enough weapons for one." "What about your robots?" The phone on the table lights up. "Hello, how may I help you?" "Where do you sleep?" Xavier looks around. "You can sleep anywhere here." He's nothing like the hunters in the cartoons. Frank is disappointed. Xavier hands him a cup of yellowish-green liquid. "Do you like weapons and robots?" "No, but a hunter's house should have these things, right?" Frank takes a sip of the drink and makes a face. "Huh?" He would rather drink Dad's veggie juice. He's about to ask Xavier what it is when he sees Xavier had finished his own cup, without a hint of disgust. "What makes you think that?" Xavier asks, putting his cup down. As a guest, Frank has to be polite. He forces himself to swallow the liquid in his mouth, thinking that maybe it's some kind of energy supplement. He places the cup on the corner of the table. "Everyone in the Hunters Unite has one. They have a secret base filled with tons of stuff, too." "Did you hide yours, Mr. Xavier?" Xavier thinks for a moment before saying, "Their stuff comes with their base. Mine is simpler, so it doesn't have that much." Seeing Frank's cup remain untouched, Xavier picks it up. "Do you not like juice?" Frank's eyes widen. "That was juice?" Chapter 3. A Hunter's Free Time. Everyone in Hunters Unite is so strong. You can find them on the top 10 hunters list. Xavier probably wasn't picked to join them. No matter what kind of hunter he is, he should be going out every day to defeat wanderers and save the world. Right? Frank gathers himself again and gets ready for the big battle with Xavier tomorrow. But the next day, when Frank looks for Xavier in the morning, he finds him asleep in the living room. Wearing a jacket, Xavier has one of his hands hanging off the couch. His brow furrows. In the bright sunlight, stuff shimmers on his shoulder. They remind Frank of specks of light or even glass. Where did Xavier go last night? What did he do? Frank decides to ask Xavier when he wakes up. However, Xavier doesn't move for a long, long time. He doesn't toss or turn and manages to make Frank sleepy. Frank waits and waits until his eyelids start to droop. When he opens his eyes, Frank sees Xavier in the foyer, hand on the doorknob, ready to head out. He comes back to his senses. Knowing that the moment he's been waiting for is finally here, Frank runs over. "Where are you going, Mr. Xavier? I want to go too." Not giving Xavier a chance to refuse, he tightly grabs his hand. And, just like that, Frank goes out with Xavier for the first time. His teacher always says the early bird catches the worm, but Xavier slept in. It's already noon. Are there any wanderers left? Xavier walks around and looks relaxed. Could it be that he isn't worried because he knows where all the wanderers are hiding? Frank can only guess. Maybe they're going to a dark cave next, or an abandoned building with strange noises coming out of it. After 10 minutes, Xavier stops walking. In front of them is a hot pot restaurant. It's lunchtime, so a lot of people are here. Xavier sits by the window, glancing at the menu before ordering with a frightening familiarity. Bunny's fatty beef, Bunny's signature lamb rolls, beef brain, beef tenderloins, ox tongue, tripe, beef ribs, black chicken rolls, fish balls. Frank can only listen with his mouth agape until Xavier puts down the menu and says, "Spicy soup, extra spicy." Frank springs into action. "My dad told me not to eat super spicy food, Mr. Xavier." Xavier looks at Frank, as though he forgot about him. Scratching his neck, he says to the server, "Another bowl of small noodles, please." Frank takes the rabbit-themed bowl when it's put down in front of him. He watches Xavier dip the red meat in the equally red soup. Frank is speechless. He quickly snaps out of it, though, when he realizes something. You need a full stomach to fight vicious wanderers. Otherwise, where would you get your energy? Everything Xavier does has a reason. So, Frank happily eats his noodles. He puts his bowl down and stares at Xavier. Are they going to fight wanderers now? Frank was wrong again. Half an hour later, they arrive at a supermarket. Xavier pushes around a shopping cart, passing by the numerous aisles in the store. He browses the shelves slowly, sometimes even asking for Frank's opinions. "Which one do you think is better?" Xavier asks. 30 minutes later, they arrive at a bookstore. Behind the counter is a very scary-looking man with a large beard who smiles at them. Frank hears the man talk to Xavier like they're the same age. And then he says something he doesn't understand. What's a vegetarian? What are meal plans? Then, finally, Xavier leaves the store and takes Frank home. Frank is at a loss. Where are the wanderers? Why would a hunter like Xavier not want to fight wanderers? Frank thinks. then realizes that like children getting 2 days of holiday after 5 days of school, Xavier doesn't fight wanderers every day. So once Xavier is done resting, he'll go fight wanderers, right? Chapter 4. A Hunter's Secret Training. With that, Frank waits and waits and waits. But still, he never sees Xavier. The best of the best go out to fight wanderers. Instead, all he gets is the rapidly approaching end of his summer vacation. A week later, unable to wait anymore, Frank takes out his homework assignment and starts writing. Deep space hunters will sleep until noon every day. When they wake up, they have lunch. After lunch, they either walk around outside or stay home to watch TV. Sometimes they fall asleep watching TV. Deep space hunters aren't picky. They eat everything. They also aren't picky when it comes to places to sleep. They can sleep anywhere. But Frank stops writing. Deep space hunters are kind of weird. One night, Frank woke up to use the bathroom. He saw the balcony when he passed by. But as he came out, a shadowy figure stood on the balcony, scaring him. "It's me." "Mr. Xavier?" "Yeah." Xavier enters the living room and shuts the balcony door behind him. His shadow elongates under the moonlight. "Did you fight wanderers, Mr. Xavier?" Xavier remains silent and starts to head to his room. His body is covered in shiny stuff again, but Frank can't see them clearly. "Why didn't you bring me with you if you're fighting wanderers?" Xavier pushes Frank to his room as he walks. "Go to bed. If you're not tall enough, you're not allowed to fight wanderers." Okay. After getting back into bed, Frank wonders about one thing. Why did Xavier come through the balcony and not the front door? Frank slumps on his desk, unsure if he should write that. "What are you doing?" Xavier comes over. "Summer vacation homework." Xavier seems taken aback. "There's homework during summer?" "Yeah." Frank lifts the notebook up. Xavier reads everything and doesn't say anything for a while. "If all I needed to do to be a deep space hunter was sleep and get taller, that'd be great. But it's not like what I thought it would be." Xavier sits down by the desk. Actually, that's not what being a deep space hunter is. Other than fighting wanderers, we have to do other things too, such as taking exams or doing special training, stuff like that. "But I never see you fight wanderers." "Well, that's because it's been peaceful here in the city." "There's not a single wanderer?" Frank asks. Xavier thinks for a moment. There are more hunters nowadays, and they're all very strong. Every time there's a wanderer, they defeat it before I even know it's here. Frank takes a while to process what Xavier said. "So you're not fast enough?" "You could say that." Frank raises his fist. "I think you should try harder, Mr. Xavier." Xavier smiles and fist bumps him. "All right." "When do you have exams?" "I don't have exams." "What about training?" "Nope." Frank writes the following. Deep space hunters don't have exams. They also don't need to train. Xavier grabs his pen. "I don't have to train right now," Xavier says after a long while. "But I can work one session in." Frank is excited. "Can you teach me how to fight wanderers, Mr. Xavier?" "Teach you?" Before Xavier can change his mind, Frank says, "Master." Xavier doesn't argue with him. "Just call me Xavier." Chapter 5. The Real Battle. It's sunny the next day. There are several groups of people in Lincoln Central Park, walking and picnicking. Children around the same age as Frank are running across the field or playing around the playground. Xavier puts his bag on the grass. He sits down and starts taking things out. "Choose one." Seeing all sorts of weapons laid out in front of him, Frank is amazed. Without any hesitation, he grabs a small wooden sword. "I want this one." He swings the sword a couple of times. then notices Xavier picking up a stick. We're sparring, right? Are you looking down on me, Mr. Xavier? If you can knock this stick out of my hand, then I'll swap to a better weapon, Xavier says. 10 minutes later, Frank is out of breath. Xavier sits unmoving, with the stick still in his hand. A sword doesn't suit me. Frank throws it away and picks up a water gun. He rushes to the fountain and loads his ammo, and then comes back, chest puffed. Xavier, as calm as ever, swaps his stick with a paper cup. Another 10 minutes pass. Frank accidentally squirts himself with water. Xavier pours out the water in his cup, his body completely dry. A gun doesn't suit me either. Frank tosses the water gun away and gets a pair of maracas. Xavier picks up the sticks again. He breaks it, holding each half in both hands. Another 10 minutes pass. Frank is drenched in sweat. He's a little dizzy with the sun beating down on him, and his palms are red from training. Despite not having touched even a hair on Xavier's head, he's happy. This is the first time he's seen Xavier act like a deep space hunter. Is this how you train to be a hunter, Mr. Xavier? Unexpectedly, Xavier shakes his head. Nope. But aren't you teaching me how to fight wanderers? Xavier looks up as if he hadn't heard Frank. He stands up and looks around. Frank asks again hurriedly, only to hear Xavier say, "You haven't even beaten me once." Critical hit. Frank stands there in shock. All the doubts he had earlier return. This so-called hunter doesn't own anything cool. He doesn't have any weapons or fought any wanderers. He's always doing strange things. He even lied about training him. Xavier is a liar? Frankie, wait for me here. I'm going over... Seeing Frank's expression, Xavier pauses. What's wrong? Upset, Frank is on the verge of tears. Suddenly, there's a loud explosion. In a split second, he feels somebody pick him up. Opening his eyes, Frank is stunned. He looks at the source of the sound. Xavier covers Frank's eyes with his hand. Don't look. The wanderers are here. The sky darkens, and the sharp wail of a police siren brings Frank back to reality. Wait here and don't run outside the light. Xavier lifts his hand, and a golden shield appears above Frank's head like a round tent. After that, he turns around and runs off. Frank sees a sword quickly manifest in Xavier's right hand. It's brighter and cooler than any weapon he saw on TV. As people run away, he sees Xavier go against the flow of crowd. Several terrifying wanderers appear from the trees. With a single swing, Xavier's weapon transforms into countless light blades. The wanderers instantly disappear in the light. He turns, leaps, and appears by the side of the inflatable castle, striking down into two wanderers like lightning. With a deafening roar, the wanderers turn to dust. The adults and children who haven't been able to leave are shocked. Leave this place. In the dust and smoke, Xavier turns around and leaps again. He takes the sword in his hand and lunges towards another wanderer. Frank's eyes widen. Xavier is like a beam of light, turning everything he attacks into dust. It's as if Frank is watching a meteor shower of light. After he cuts down the last wanderer, Xavier lands on the ground. With a flick of his wrist, the sword disappears, leaving only a speck of light around him. It's as if he's standing under a starry sky. Frank is stunned. Final chapter, Chapter 6, A Kept Secret. When he comes out of the convenience store with Xavier, the park entrance across the street is covered with police tape. Police cars and ambulances are everywhere, and people with cameras are also running around. Everything is a mess. Eat this. We'll go home after. Frank takes the ice cream cone Xavier gives him. It's a sweet treat to calm his nerves. Why didn't you tell the police that you're the one who got rid of the wanderers, Mr. Xavier? Frank feels a little sad. He wanted to see Xavier get praise on TV, but once he was done, Xavier dragged him out of the park. Xavier looks serious. Didn't your teachers tell you not to brag when you do a good deed? Still, Xavier's expression looks a little strange. It's almost like he doesn't want people to find out about him. Then again, That's not the only thing strange about Xavier. Besides, Frank is certain that Xavier is a very, very good hunter. Everything he does must have a reason. So, Frank looks up at him with the same serious face. Don't worry, I'll keep it a secret. On the last day of summer vacation, Ulysses arrives to pick up his son. This summer, I met the world's greatest deep space hunter. Wanderers are no match for him. He uses a super cool sword, and it's sharper than anything in the world. He told me that being a hunter means you shouldn't brag about the good things you've done. That's why I want to be a hunter just like him. He's my role model. He looks up at Xavier. Did you cast a spell on my son? No. Xavier is sparring with Frank using chopsticks. I just took him out for hot pot. After that, we went shopping at the supermarket and the bookstore. Then we went for a walk in the park. Dad, Xavier is super duper cool. He eats the greatest hot pot and his walks are awesome. But I can't tell you exactly how amazing he is because... Frank looks at Xavier. He's still wearing a normal t-shirt and normal pajama pants. But now, in Frank's eyes, those are better and stronger than any armor. Because it's a secret between me and Xavier. Ulysses doesn't know how to react. He picks up Frank's luggage and grabs the boy, still running around the living room, pretending to be Xavier. He doesn't know what kind of secret his son agreed to keep for Xavier, but... whatever, it's not on Frank. After all, when Ulysses was younger, he was also fooled by Xavier. Anecdote number 2. Passing by. Chapter 1. Team 13. 16 years ago, spring, prior to Arthur's memory decaying to a point where he couldn't remember anything. Not long after the new year, many of Lincoln's residents still bask in the holiday spirit. However, Bloomshore District's Special Task Force, specifically Team 13, was in a panic. After 5 long years, they were welcoming a new recruit. Heard his evol is light or something. He's usually only responsible for providing light and scouting a path during missions. Support role. It's not that impressive. Impressive people won't be sent to our team. Staying here for a year is almost like being buried in the ground for a decade. So, he's just like us. A nobody. Luke hands over the newcomer's information to Tommy. Is he here to also fix our hallway's lights? Standing before the office door, Arthur is hit by a wave of mixed emotions. This marks his 16th year as a police officer and the 9th as captain of the Team 13. In his younger days, his passion led him to numerous accomplishments, but a severe injury from a high-risk mission 5 years ago significantly diminished his mobility. Having recovered since then, Arthur did some mental calculations. Even at the risk of reputational damage, he must utilize the energy of new blood to somehow mold this group of misfits back into shape. Attention everyone! Arthur swings the door open, breaking the chatty atmosphere. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the rookie will report for duty. We only got 2 hours left, so we need to start prepping. Tommy, are you working part-time as a junk collector? This pizza box has been here for weeks. Throw it away. Arthur is completely oblivious to the neck pillow he's still wearing. And this figurine on your desk, Luke? I've told you not to bring this into our office. It makes us look bad. Team 13 is at the bottom of the hierarchy. After numerous reshuffles, they have all whittled down to a single captain, 2 officers, and a support technician who has just submitted a transfer request. They're hardly what one would call a team. In their early years, they made a name for themselves by solving several major cases. However, their present has nothing of their past luster, marked by a lack of talent. Their reputation has taken a hit due to the failed investigations. When their department relocated, they were left behind to handle the task of sorting through a plethora of old files. To this day, they still inhabit the old building. As time passed, they were all but forgotten. Their only interactions with the others being the occasional job to retrieve files or search at the headquarters. At the age of 23, the rookie Xavier stands before the door, holding a cardboard box. His uniform is neat, and his expressionless face clean. He sticks out, being the only lively person in the otherwise gloomy hallway. "Excuse me." As the door swings open, a group of people, in the midst of their hustle and bustle, lift their heads. They are dumbfounded by the face illuminated under the bright white light. A college student? Has he graduated yet? Everyone who comes here is just a bunch of pretty boys. Slightly awkward, Arthur clears his throat, signaling for everyone to quiet down. His eyes, filled with anticipation, move to the newcomer. "You must be Xavier, right? Why don't you introduce yourself?" "Xavier, male, 23. I'm the newest member. I look forward to working with you," the young man says, heading straight to the isolated desk in the corner. He places the cardboard box beside the computer and silently starts to arrange his things. Tommy and Luke simultaneously exchange disgruntled glances. What's this guy's deal? However, as time passes, Luke's impression begins to change. Whether it's tasks assigned by the higher-ups or senior members, Xavier always completes them quickly and methodically. He works until they're done, but nothing more. He's never late, but he doesn't leave early. When asked why he requested a transfer to the squad, he answers in a matter-of-fact tone. "This place has many old, archived records of Lincoln City. I want to read all of them. But there are likely over 5 million criminal records and fingerprint files in the database. And ones that haven't been entered into the system. The files from the beginning of the century alone probably amount to tens of millions of pages." Xavier falls silent for a moment. Seeing him lose hope, Arthur pats his shoulder as though he understands. "It's good to like reading, but you can't spend all your time in the archives. Let's have beef hot pot tonight." Xavier doesn't like a lot of things, but he's very enthusiastic when it comes to eating hot pot. Watching as Xavier orders plate after plate of beef and lamb, Arthur is relieved. Knowing a person's favorite thing is basically getting closer to them. During a mission, Xavier was injured in an attempt to rescue someone. He spent nearly half a month in the hospital. After being discharged, he insisted he didn't mean to rescue that person. He even claimed the incident had traumatized him. He ended up applying for a desk job at the logistics administrator. Like a forgotten cactus on the windowsill, Xavier lives a simple life, thriving amidst the winds and the sun's harsh glare. Chapter 2. An Unspoken Secret. Xavier always tidies up the paperwork when everyone else is out on missions. He helps Luke whenever the hallway lights are broken. Despite Xavier mostly keeping to himself, people find he's actually quite easy to get along with, his evol even more useful. Sometimes, for reasons unknown, a flash of light causes the criminal they're chasing to unexpectedly drop to the ground. Our target this time is an old friend, Lawrence. Team 13 has its usual mission briefing. Silence hangs in the air for a moment before Arthur awkwardly clears his throat, pointing at the image on the whiteboard with a laser pen. "You all know what he looks like. The Skyhaven boys learned Lawrence recently returned. Let's keep a close eye on him and proceed with caution." Lawrence made his fortune selling evil hallucinogens, distributing his supply to major entertainment venues in Lincoln City and Skyhaven. Whether he's smart or has someone else guiding him, they always arrive either too late to find him or the goods are gone. They can never catch him. Several of their meticulously planned operations were ruined, too. Just last month, Arthur was disheartened, declaring that if they failed again, it would be handed over to another team. Tommy understood that this was a subtle hint from the higher-ups that Team 13 didn't need to continue existing. "Our mission this time is rather unique," Arthur says, surveying the group. "According to a reliable source, Lawrence will be at the newly opened Palace Bathhouse next month. The purpose of this meeting is to select an undercover agent." His eyes brim with anticipation. They are to disguise themselves as an employee. The goal is to approach the target. No one volunteers. They draw straws. As they all unfold the crumpled slips of paper, a collective sigh of relief is let out. Only Tommy speaks up, on the verge of tears at the sight of the little turtle on his slip. I would rather do anything else. That place is too dangerous. I haven't even fallen in love yet. Please don't make me go. Arthur glances at him with disappointment and frustration. You're uglier than a cow. You'd be seen as suspicious almost immediately. If you looked like Xavier... The room is silent. All eyes turn to Xavier, who is eating his noodles in the corner. Initially lost in thought, Xavier slowly raises his head, feeling many gazes on him. The city's most renowned entertainment district is a short, 100-meter street, tightly ensconced by grand, imposing buildings. The alley behind it is narrow and seemingly endless, almost devoid of light. Here, those with shady businesses gather, their intentions silently understood. Deep in the night, a group of men in leopard print shirts and gleaming black shoes saunter on the pavement, spewing alcohol-laden obscenities. Streetlights illuminate job flyers plastered onto the walls, phone numbers mostly torn off. Among the group, a lanky, young man with silver hair can be spotted in the distance. In a denim shirt and jeans, he leans against the lamppost, engrossed in the music from his headphones. A middle-aged man, cigarette hanging from his lips, approached and sizes up the young man engrossed in his phone. High school student? College? Ah, an adult. What brings you here? The young man removes his headphones. I'm looking to make some quick cash. Do you know how? Wayne leads Xavier into a private room on the top floor of the palace bathhouse. As he pushes open the door, a middle-aged man in his 40s is seated in the farthest corner, pouring tea at a mahogany-long table. This is the man in charge, Roman. Hello, Roman, Xavier says, following Wayne's lead in the greeting. I'm Bob. Roman, looking like he's had a long stay in the underworld, scrutinizes Xavier. His gaze lingers. Just as Xavier begins to worry his identity might be exposed, that it's time to do Plan B, the man abruptly stands. He pulls a book from the shelf behind him, flipping through the pages. Your name is too plain. It doesn't suit our palace, Roman says. He looks at Xavier. Christian. We'll call you Christian. The palace had only been open for a month, staffed by young people around the same age as Xavier. After receiving his uniform and work badge, Xavier promptly completes his onboarding. The moment he finishes, his supervisor urges him to clock in. Where's Alexander? The supervisor anxiously scans the area. What? A stomach ache? Roman said he wanted to show this batch to Lawrence. Xavier willingly raises a hand. I can go, sir. You're the newcomer, aren't you? The supervisor sizes up the young man. Realizing he doesn't have a better solution at the moment, he nods. Lawrence is here to discuss business with our boss today, so mind your words. The supervisor, watching Xavier leave, mutters to himself. Such a handsome fellow. It's a pity he's dealing with this. Xavier arrives at the private room, Fontainebleau. 2 bodyguards stand at the door, only allowing him to enter after a thorough search. As Xavier steps inside, a client is already lying on the massage bed. He pushes the tool cart to the side of the bed, simultaneously retrieving the essential oil and slipping on gloves. Hello, is this your first time here? Could I interest you in a membership? Hands press onto the man's spine. The 3rd vertebra. 5th. By the time they reach the 7th, a strong pressure causes Lawrence to almost scream from the pain. As he tries to lift his head, he realizes he's being held down. He can't move. Where's your supply? Who are you? Lawrence gasps. Let go. Let go of me. Help! Ouch! Someone breaks through the door, and a group of guards instantly appear at the entrance. Xavier looks at them and releases Lawrence. Don't you know whose turf this is? Lawrence snatches a gun from one of his men. The others also raise their weapons, all pointed at Xavier. He slowly removes his gloves, leaving everyone unsure of his next move. For a moment, no one moves. Without even seeing Xavier move, some of the men are knocked down by a sudden burst of light. The young man holds a sword seemingly forged from the moonlight itself. By the time Lawrence comes back to his senses, all the men around him have been taken down. Xavier walks up to the man, kicks him, and then uses the sword to lift his chin. "Can we talk?" By the time Luke arrives as backup, Xavier stands alone amidst a circle of fallen bodyguards. In the corner, Lawrence is tied up with bed sheets, his neck at an odd angle. "Xavier, did you take out everyone in this room?" "No." Xavier walks down the corridor, pulling Luke by his collar. "They ran into my sword." Message received, requesting backup. Xavier walks for a bit and then stops. Luke follows Xavier's gaze. A flood of men in black suits spill out of the elevator. "I'm not very strong, so you'll have to do the fighting," Xavier says. All Luke knows is that the grip on his collar loosens and then he's tossed out of the hallway. "You didn't look like you were losing." Half a month later, at the commendation ceremony, Luke scratches his head. Under the fervent gaze of his fellow officers, he steps onto the stage to speak. "I'm not quite sure what happened myself, seeing all those people. I steeled myself and thought, might as well close my eyes and take the gamble. Then I just started punching. Before I knew it, they fell like dominoes." Luke recalls the day with a smirk. "Maybe they were just too weak. Oh, the true hero of this incident was our team's Xav." And there is more. A month later, Polar Bear, notorious for selling illicit evil drugs, shows up at the doorsteps of the police station. He was tied up, weeping and confessing his sins. Another 2 months later, Cash, who had been using his evil to do telecom scams, is found live streaming on MeToo, dramatically slapping himself. Tears stream down his face as he implores everyone not to trust calls from unknown overseas numbers. 3 months later, in the light of the outstanding performance of Team 13, the HQ commander temporarily reassigns Luke and Tommy. It's good for furthering their career development, but both of them refuse. They argue their ability to catch criminals is purely because of luck. They feel inadequate being in more important roles. They're open to do temporary reassignment, but are firmly against permanent transfer. For reasons they can't quite articulate, ever since Xavier joined, their previously inept team somehow found their fighting spirit. As for who brought them luck, and whether Xavier is as simple as he appears to be, no one wants to know. Everyone seems to have an unspoken understanding to guard his secret. Chapter 3. A Familiar Face. As the year draws to a close, the medals and recommendation letters from the headquarters arrive. Tommy and Luke, 2 men on the cusp of their 30s, hug each other in a tearful embrace. For a moment, it's unclear whether Luke is crying from being overwhelmed or from the prickling pain of Tommy's wire-bristle stubble. After years of being underdogs, recognition finally came, reigniting the dreams of many. Luke pushes Tommy, rubbing his own reddening cheeks. When Tommy goes to hug Xavier, Xavier places another pot of cactus on his desk, creating a barrier between him and the others. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve. I haven't finished sorting out this year's files yet, and I won't be able to make it home again. Hey, I'm gonna be home alone too. Someone's gonna have to keep watch here. How about we do this together? Xavier, will you be here tomorrow? Seeing Xavier about to shake his head, Luke quickly adds, "There's plenty of meat. You can eat as much as you want." Okay. On the promised day, cloaked in a veil of night, Xavier walks back to the police station alone. Outside, the sound of fireworks echo. Inside, the break room buzzes with warmth and a growing merriment. At the heart of the table is a hot pot. Luke has brought freshly wrapped dumplings from home, sparking a debate with Tommy about whether pork-filled or seafood-filled dumplings taste better. Arthur calls out to Xavier. "Why are you standing there? Come in and help put up the window decorations while the food cooks." Once the dumplings are eaten, snow begins to fall again. The room is very warm, prompting Xavier to step outside for some fresh air. Not long after, Arthur follows him, handing him a can of beer while lighting up a cigarette. Last month, while doing inventory, I found a missing file from the archive, he says, inhaling a smoke ring without glancing at Xavier. SD199402122. An event that happened decades ago. The involved party is long gone, and the office gave up looking into it. I wonder who still cares about this case. Xavier watches him in silence, patiently waiting for what will be said next. I immediately requested for your personal files from HQ. They were impeccable. Even during your time here, your actions have been anything but disappointing. There was a match in the portrait database. I found this. Arthur turns to Xavier, handing him a picture. In the faded, yellow photograph are the traces of a man with silver hair. His figure is tall, slender. All that remains is a blurry white silhouette. Everyone has secrets, he chuckles, exhaling a ring of smoke. The older we are, the less expectations we have for the new year. Regardless of our days, life continues in its steady, monotonous flow. We hope you choose to stay. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, a group of people can be seen mimicking the TV's anchor's lively dance, exclaiming, "Happy New Year!" Xavier sighs, wondering if these people are truly capable of being a competent team. He lifts his head, staring at the New Year's fireworks that burst at the stroke of midnight above 1,000 high-rise buildings. It's time for him to leave. Chapter 4. Old Friend. 2 days after Lincoln's New Year's Day, the streets remain eerily deserted. Xavier slips the missing file into the mailbox downstairs, then proceeds to feed the stray cats before climbing up the stairs to his apartment. During the time it takes for the rice to heat up, Xavier steals a glance at his phone. Finally, after 24 hours, he finally receives a response to the message he sent last night. Noah says, "Aren't you going to ask what I'm going to do with this?" Xavier had told him to come to his house to pick up the file. Xavier says, "That's your business." There's a silence on the other end. The typing indicator appears and disappears. Again and again. Xavier stares at his phone, waiting. It's not until the microwave dings, signaling his food is ready, that the message is sent. Noah says, "I want to use this for a new identity. I just want to be an ordinary person this time. Are you still there? Do you think it's funny? I don't blame you, though. I agree." Xavier says, "I was heating up some food." Noah replies, "Is it that earth junk food with the absolutely no nutritional value again? I don't get why you like it. Their convenience stores can't even be bothered to change the flavor of the chicken cutlet rice bowls." Xavier replies, "And what about you? You mentioned how you're not acclimated to the climate, and you're not fond of the food, but you fell in love with someone here. There's nothing wrong with that." Noah says, "Enough about me. Are you really going to wait for that person?" "Yeah." "How long are you going to wait? 10, 100, or 1,000 years?" Something messed up with the slip space during backtrack. The spaceship couldn't handle the deep space tunnel fluctuations. Both she and the Aether Core vanished without a trace. For all we know, they might already be cosmic dust. Xavier replies, "I know." Noah says, "Even if you press on, you're not going to get the outcome you're hoping for." Suddenly, the deafening sound of fireworks resound outside. Xavier looks into the night. Some windows are adorned with festive decorations for the New Year's. The outline of these decorations, bathed in a soft yellow glow, paints a picture of safety and warmth as silhouettes move within. Xavier walks to the door and activates the intercom's visual screen, revealing the figure of a young man. He presses a button. "It's in the mailbox. Take it and go." "You..." The young man is startled. He looks from left to right before he composes himself. He focuses on the camera. Goodbye. Wait, I have something to say. With a certain resolution set in his heart, he stares at his former friend on the other side of the screen. Be careful. They're going to find you. Chapter 5. The Road's End. Lingering in one place for too long always leaves noticeable traces. Xavier has certainly thought about this. Over the years, he has walked many paths, only to realize that there is no real difference between them. Despite their inevitable end, these paths are still worth treading. The fire blazes with such an intensity that it leaves no chance for survival. Everything burns, leaving nothing behind. He decides to die in this fire. Xavier turns his gaze to the abandoned factory, which appears much like a military base. The criminal chose a good place to hide. He drags the unconscious man onto the snow, retraces his steps, and discards the man's identification and baton in a corner. The sign of a struggle has been set. The flames surge even higher, lighting the night sky. A few residential buildings are lit, and soon, the urgent wail of a siren echoes from afar. As the bus stops, Xavier watches a police car speed by. As he prepares to board the bus, there's a cry behind him. He turns and finds a little girl sitting alone at the corner of the road, under a streetlight. The girl is young, a dirty rabbit plushie lying at her feet. Upon seeing someone approach, her sobbing gets worse. Are you lost? Did you run away from home? Never mind. Cry louder so they can find you when I'm gone. Why are you so mean, mister? The candy in your mouth hasn't even melted yet. You haven't been away from home for long, have you? Xavier approaches her, brushing the snow off her head. Since you live nearby, you should hurry back. What about you? The little girl looks up at him, her curiosity overpowering her fear. Did you run away from home? What is that shiny thing around your neck? Xavier rubs his neck, choosing the easiest question to answer. I'm leaving soon. What a coincidence, a voice suddenly rings out from the other side. A young man, leaning against a sign that reads closed, stares at Xavier with an air of enthusiasm. He has silver hair, much like Xavier's, though he seems slightly younger. Long time no see. It has been a long time, Xavier says, looking at his former friend. You followed me all the way here to let me know. It must have been hard. I'm curious how you managed to elude us. His friend walks over, hiding in plain sight as such an inconspicuous guy. It's not much different from what I imagined. I thought you'd killed them before leaving. He shrugs, a twinkle of amusement in his eyes. You abandoned them. Just like the backtrackers. How are you going to cover your tracks this time? Kill me? Or let me... Before he finishes speaking, a dazzling light flashes. When his vision clears, Xavier and the little girl are nowhere to be found. The man stares at the footprints in the snow and grimaces. A blade of light materializes in his hand, and he hurries to follow the faint energy ripple. Just a street away, Xavier lands in a narrow alley, cradling the girl in his arms. The flurry of snow he makes conceals their footprints. He picks up the fallen rabbit plushie, brushes it off, and hands it to the girl. If anyone asks, say this rabbit helped you. The little girl clutches her bunny tightly, nodding. You're very handsome. When I grow up, will you be my boyfriend? No. Why? Do you like someone already? Xavier hums softly, turning a blind eye to her sad expression. He hurries out of the alley. I'm leaving now. You can watch the shooting stars later. The surrounding light gradually converges in the palm of his hand. The street light nearby, the searchlight in the distance, and the light from every window of the surrounding skyscrapers suddenly go out, and even the moonlight dims. The city is plunged into darkness. The sound of footsteps stop, then draws closer. Xavier opens his eyes, but he doesn't turn to face the person behind him. Instead, he gazes at the sky. You never managed to beat me in the past. Things are different. Besides, the teachers at the academy will only teach the best of the best. It's too dark. So much so that the young man named Isaiah can barely make out Xavier's silhouette. His position can only be discerned through the sound of his voice. You can guess how I'll erase our traces. Suddenly, the darkened sky illuminates. Radiant light engulfs the two. Clusters of light streaks across the sky like countless shooting stars, each shining brightly. The light bathes the city hall, illuminating every tree lining in the streets, and in an instant, the entire city is as bright as day. Sweetheart, what are you doing here? You had me worried sick. The girl holds her breath, clutching the rabbit plushie in her arms tightly as she's staring at the sky. A young woman, tears streaming down her face, hugs her. The girl's eyes light up with excitement as she exclaims, Mom, a very handsome guy saved me. Arthur is jolted awake by an urgent phone call. An explosion has occurred at an abandoned factory in the southern part of Lincoln City, where strong traces of evil have been detected. An anonymous tip claims to have spotted the silhouette of the S-rank fugitive Grey Hawk. By the time he arrives at the scene, the factory, enveloped in raging flames, has been burnt to a crisp. As for Grey Hawk, he is currently lying shivering in the snow, on the verge of being frozen to death. Arthur has a bad feeling about this. Turning to his colleague who arrived earlier than him, he asks, What happened? What's that guy from your team called? Silver hair, kinda young, doesn't smile much, keeps to himself? The officer ponders for a moment. Is it Xavier? Xavier? Arthur nods, a sense of foreboding creeping into his heart. He was trapped inside. His colleague's voice suddenly falls to a whisper, his gaze fixed on the raging fire. He couldn't get out. The entire city is blanketed in pristine silver, devoid of any sound. The heavy snowfall ceased by dawn, leaving only 2 sporadic snowflakes to flutter onto Xavier's face. The fresh, crisp snow crunches underneath his boots, each step becoming more heavy than the last. By the time he reaches his home, he can only lean against the wall and slowly sink to the ground. After a long journey, it's time for a good night's sleep. During that winter, everyone talked not only about New Year's resolutions, but also about the shooting stars that suddenly appeared after the abrupt plunge into darkness. Some speculated it was an explosion of neutron stars millions of light years away. Others suggested it was a Renaissance aircraft from a neighboring country being destroyed, or a new type of biological weapon. A day later, a team conducts a thorough search of the factory. Eventually, in an abandoned partition on the 3rd floor, they find a police gun designated ST-1101 and some remaining identification. Xavier, 23, served in the Bloomshore Special Task Force of Lincoln City in the winter of 2033. He honorably sacrificed himself during his solo mission to apprehend the wanted criminal, Grey Hawk. Final chapter, Chapter 6, The Passing Spring. In the year 2045, spring arrives. The day before New Year's Eve, Xavier finds himself in a cemetery on the city's outskirts. Despite the passage of time, the disaster from 11 years ago failed to ravage this place. The sun, however, has bleached the granite tombstones white, and the details of the deceased have been obscured by grass and blossoms. But in line with the Special Task Force's customary confidentiality, the tombstones bear no pictures or names, only birth and death years, and a string of special police numbers. Initially, Xavier only remembered ST-1101. As the years passed, many people appeared. Some were old friends, while others were strangers. Some he had spoken to, and others he had merely encountered once before. He didn't visit often, but when he did, there were always flowers placed on the grave. He remembers the month just after his death. The turnout at his funeral was not large. Yet, inexplicably, everyone was crying. Luke, removing his glasses, was sobbing, snot running down his nose. Tommy, embracing Arthur, wailed loudly. Even Arthur subtly wiped at the corner of his reddening eyes, though he turned his head away. It's a particular feeling, as if part of his life is buried beneath the tombstone, despite it being empty. It's not the absurdity of being taken by death, but rather the unfamiliarity of being remembered for the first time by those who should not remember him. It's like a traveler, after many years, returns to the place from which he had departed, only to discover someone is still gazing at the spot that he had vanished. Happy New Year! The florist takes the money and hands him the flowers. Xavier collects his thoughts, expresses his gratitude, and also wishes him a Happy New Year. Within the cemetery, Xavier gently places flowers on the graves of those he respectfully refers to as neighbors. A young girl hurriedly wheels an elderly man past him. "You always keep saying that. Luke this, Tommy that. Oh, and your beloved rookie, Xavier." Upon hearing his name, Xavier turns around. He sees the elderly man in the wheelchair, points at him, his hand trembling. "Isn't that Xavier?" "That's Xavier." The girl pauses, her gaze meeting Xavier's. She gives him an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry. My grandpa is old. He confuses people when he's not lucid." Xavier shakes his head. "It's all right." He doesn't say much, and the girl doesn't follow up. She simply leans in to whisper something into the old man's ear. Her voice is barely audible, but he hears her say, "Here for the same reason we are." The girl stops Xavier from leaving, smiling. "Excuse me, are you a relative of a police officer? Can I take your picture with my grandpa?" Xavier turns his gaze to the elderly man in the wheelchair and nods. He wheels the old man to the edge of the cemetery, beneath a lone pine tree. As the setting sun disappears, the overlapping shadows of trees and people dance upon the aged white brick wall. "I may be old, but my memory isn't as frail as you might think," the elderly man in the wheelchair says, slowly. "Long time no see." "Long time no see." "Don't worry. I won't remember you for long." He laughs and coughs, gasping for breath several times. "In a few more years, when people ask about Xavier, I'll have forgotten about you." Not that far away, the young girl raises her hand, flashes an OK sign. "Ready? Say cheese. 3, 2, 1. The camera clicks. After many years, he finally leaves a bit of himself in someone else's story. "Do you want a copy?" Xavier shakes his head. "All right then. Happy New Year," the girl says. She waves him a goodbye and leaves with the old man. Xavier also smiles. "Happy New Year." Xavier's third anecdote. When Shooting Stars Fall. Chapter 1. Distant Stars. This is the 100th time I sneak a glance at Xavier. You must first pretend to look at the clock on the classroom wall. Then, your gaze can slowly drift to his face. You have to calm down your beating heart and do your best to avoid his gaze. Otherwise, you'll be like me, caught red-handed. Pretending to be nonchalant, I shift my gaze away from those tranquil eyes and turn around. According to the first law of cosmic attraction, when a person unwittingly looks at someone, there's a 98.8% chance it's because he's looking at you, too. Perhaps I caught him red-handed as he stared at me. That's what I tell myself anyway. 3 years ago, when Xavier first arrived at the academy, it was a rare, sunny day. It was the year 214. 214 years have passed since Philos' birth. It also means 214 years have passed since Earth's demise. Our teachers, born during the age of Earth, said we had substituted Earth's extinguished core with a powerful artificial one. This core holds fragmented land masses together, preventing them from scattering into the starry sea. So aside from more dust, more cloudy days, and cumbersome travel between tectonic plates, our planet isn't much different from the Earth of years past. My feet have never touched the soil of other places on Phylos. Our plate where the Academy is located is quite small. Also, unlike us, who were brought here after our Evol awakened, Xavier was a transfer student. Perchance it was the splendid sunshine, or something else, but I can always vividly recall the first time I saw him. He was tall, skinny, wearing a white school uniform. His eyes were a shade of light blue as pretty as the sky that day. Xavier entered the classroom with a wooden sword strapped to his back. He glanced at the seating chart, walked to the last row by the window, and sat down without a word. Serene and precise like the light itself. Since then, other than thank you and excuse me, he and I barely talked. I got to know him through my classmates' words. They say he doesn't live on campus because his family background is complicated, and many people have seen him surrounded by bodyguards. These rumors get even more outrageous and mysterious the more they are passed around. Yet, the more enigmatic he is, the more curious I am about Xavier. I wish to know his thoughts when he's staring off into space during lecture, what he's listening to when he wears earbuds, where he goes to hone his swordsmanship, and how talented he is in it, and how high his IQ is because he's always at the top of the class, despite clearly never paying attention during lecture. There were times when I noticed him sleeping. I tried using my Evol to resonate with his dreams, but whenever I do, I get too nervous and fail. After that, I realized, quite blatantly, that this curiosity of mine was actually a crush. I always thought Xavier and I would continue like this, coexisting yet separated by a wall of mist. But then, during our astronomy lecture, our teacher mentioned a once-in-a-century meteor shower happening next month. Seeing a meteor shower on a planet where clear skies are a rarity is even more of a once-in-a-century event. If I can see it with someone I like, then I can die without regrets. Chapter 2. Gravity. The sun is like a red-hot iron, burning a hole into the sky. Xavier stands under its crimson glow, practicing his newly learned sword techniques. The whole sequence of events feels otherworldly, deterring people from approaching and thus not interrupting him. Not too far away, I sit under the porch and hold a wooden sword. As I watch him train, I think about how to ask him. Knowing I'll forget half the things I want to say, I start writing words in the dirt with my sword. Once-in-a-century events aren't significant for Phylos' denizens anymore. People like Xavier, they'll experience many centuries. As long as Phylos' core still has energy, their lives shall last forevermore, like the planets. If he learns I'm a person who can't even live to see 100 years, he'll do anything I say out of pity. That would ruin everything. At long last, class ends. I stand up and find my target has disappeared. I look around and eventually spot him in the crowd by the Academy's gates. I hurry over, only to witness the rumor firsthand. They aren't all clad in black as one would expect, and they keep a respectable distance away from Xavier. Still, these people exude an air of oppression. Xavier, with his bag, is at the center of their group. It seems he's used to being stared at. The only difference is that rather than being his usual expressionless self, he appears slightly upset. It's completely different from how he was earlier with the sunset behind him. I know nothing of his past, nor do I know where those people are taking him. All I know is that he's not happy at the moment. Xavier! I shout his name as loudly as I can. Only after it leaves my mouth do I realize it's most likely the first time I have ever called out to him. The evening breeze rushes through the streets. In the sea of people, he turns around. Slightly puzzled expression softens when our eyes meet. I walk up to him, saying a teacher has requested his presence. Then I grab his hand and start running in the opposite direction. As for where we're headed, I haven't thought that far yet. And although I don't see Xavier's expression, his grip on my hand gradually tightens. They're catching up. His voice scatters in the wind. While I'm dazed, Xavier pulls me into a round tower and enters an empty auditorium. The lights are off. He and I are like animals who escape their cages, breathing in the dark. Through the sliver of light leaking through the window, I stare at the shadow of his hand on the windowsill. My heart is about to leap out of my throat. Some time passes, and Xavier pulls out a nearby chair and sits on another desk. I stare at him for a moment before realizing he's asking me to sit. Why did you help me? Sitting on the table, he's taller than me by a considerable amount. His eyes, swirling light in their depths, looks down at me in the dark. You appeared to be upset, so I thought you wanted to be free. How did you know I was upset? Well, we're classmates, aren't we? It's normal for me to be able to read your expression. As I try to find a way to explain myself, Xavier speaks. You learned by sneaking glances at me during class? There's a reason for that. Xavier looks at me, as though he's expecting an explanation. I wanted to ask... I wanted to invite you to watch the meteor shower at Sky Mirror Salt Flat with me. I heard the lake is very shallow, so when the light reflects on its surface, it's exactly like a mirror. It's going to look stunning in the meteor shower. Besides, a once-in-a-century thing. There won't be a next time. It's just another 100 years. For you, maybe, but for me... Huh? It's nothing. Do you want to go or not? It's truly pretty. I take my chance to invite him, but when I'm met with silence, I can feel my heart start to fall to the ground with a heavy thud. Xavier's gaze becomes distant. He only responds to me after some time has passed. I can't. Is it because of those... I hesitate, wondering what to call them. People? Xavier appears shocked, then he nods without saying a word. I don't force him to elaborate, and observe the way he looks at me. I reach out and poke the corner of his mouth. Don't be sad, I'll just go by myself. I'll bring your wish to the stars when I do. What's your wish? I don't have one. How could someone not wish for anything? Oh, do you want me to make a wish for you? I stand up from the chair and face him. I close my eyes with my hands clasped in front of me, wishing with all my heart. I wish Xavier is forever free to do what he wants. Xavier's stunned. He asks, "What about you? What's your wish?" I wish I could be healthy, but I don't even know if wishing on a star actually works. I stay quiet, waiting for the shooting star in my heart to pass before I open my eyes. Suddenly, a flash of starlight appears. I look around, only to see it's actually light from Xavier's hand. It glows in the dark. This shooting star has made a promise to you. Chapter 3. Collision. The weather forecast says it's going to be a clear day today, but there's only heavy rain in the afternoon. Fat water droplets cling to the glass windows, blurring the gray outdoors into blobs of color. I glance at the empty space by my desk, recalling I left my umbrella in my dorm. The fragrance of flowers in the botany lecture hall is slowly putting me to sleep. I tear off a piece of paper and write my sorrows. Ugh, it's so annoying. I can't believe it's raining. I also didn't bring my umbrella today. What about you? I tear the paper, scrunch it into a ball, and then throw it at Xavier's desk when the teacher isn't looking. I hear 2 swishes before receiving his reply. Ever since that night, something changed between me and Xavier. At first glance, everything remains the same. He's still being protected and leaves school right when the bell rings. We don't have any interactions outside of school, either. It's just I sometimes carelessly walk into those people and then wave goodbye to him. He'd also sometimes poke me in the back and give me one of his earbuds. Or we'd slip notes to each other in class, just like today. However, just as I'm about to look at Xavier's note, a hand snatches it away. I look up to find the teacher staring angrily at me. The classroom becomes quiet, waiting with bated breath. Luckily, he just took my note and told me to be on cleaning duty later. The rain falls from the afternoon to evening with no signs of stopping. Watching my classmates leave one after another, I pack my things and get ready to start my cleanup duties with the desks and chairs. When I turn around, I notice Xavier sitting at his desk. I rub my eyes, wondering if today is a special day. Did you stay behind to help me clean up? Xavier shakes his head and takes out an umbrella from his bag, placing it on the table in front of me. I stayed to tell you that I brought an umbrella. I recall the note the teacher took from me with its half-revealed answer and stand there like an idiot. But those people... I look out the window in a panic. They're going to be watching us, right? Maybe, Xavier says. He opens his hand, and all the light in the room gathers into his palm. Now they won't be able to see anything. Under an already gloomy sky, the lack of a light source makes everything more dim, secretive. I try to appear calm as I look away. But now it's too dark to clean up. Are you waiting for the rain to stop? Xavier holds a towel, watching me from the classroom doorway. I come back to my senses and run to him. With Xavier's help, my work gets done in no time. After I put away the cleaning supplies, I find him idling on the stone steps in front of the building. Seeing me approach, he opens his umbrella and says, "Let's go." Under the umbrella, it's almost as if the storm outside has nothing to do with us. While Xavier listens to me ramble on about the impression I had of him, I notice the corner of his mouth curling up. You're smiling a lot more ever since we've met, Xavier. Shouldn't you have already heard that from other people already? Fine, suit yourself, I huff, continuing to walk alongside him. And, of course, when silence falls between the two of us, my stomach lets out a loud, long groan. I look at Xavier immediately. He looks back at me with a blank stare. Then, there's mirth in his eyes. Do you want something to eat? But it's too late now. Are you allowed to? I scan our surroundings, getting the feeling of being watched by countless eyes in the dark. Looking back at Xavier, he hesitates for a few seconds before he adjusts his grip on the umbrella, shielding us completely from view. He hurries, so I walk faster to catch up with him. We almost end up running. When we leave those gazes behind, Xavier and I stand under the shade on the side of the street. We eat bread as we watch the endless rain. I take a bite out of my bread and glance at Xavier, my gaze eventually landing on the sword on his back. Xavier, can I look at your sword? He's a little confused, but he still takes the sword out of its sheath and hands it to me. All of a sudden, I feel nervous. I wipe both of my hands on my shirt and take it from him. I run my hand along the wooden sword, feeling every groove beneath my fingertips. Wooden swords aren't sharpened, and Xavier's isn't any different. Even though there are countless marks from wear and tear, anyone can see that the quality of this sword is beyond average. Xavier, why do you like to train so much? You rarely take breaks when you train, and you're always carrying a sword around. It's not that I like it. Xavier throws the empty wrapper into the trash. It's the only thing I've been good at since I was a child. I give him a confused look, waiting for him to continue, but he doesn't keep talking. Instead, with a glimmer in his eyes, he changes the subject. When did you say the meteor shower was? Next week. Why? Do you want to come with me? I look up at Xavier with hope in my eyes, watching him stand there in silence. He seems hesitant, but within seconds, his expression stiffens. I follow his gaze, my smile fading from my face. A group of familiar men are standing there with us under the shade. They say nothing, but their intentions are clear. Like a wall, the heavy rain is going to separate us. I look at Xavier, but he just stands there, staring at them. The tension between us continues to crumble, ready to collapse at any given moment. Finally, after a long silence, he gives in. As the rain falls on him, Xavier hands me the still dripping umbrella and leaves with them. Later, I ask Xavier what would happen if he didn't leave that night. He thinks about it, and then says to reach for freedom is to give up. It took me a long time to understand what he meant. If wishing on a star does make your wish come true, then I wish I could be healthy. Then I can wait another 100 years to watch the meteor shower with Xavier. Chapter 4. Friction. I didn't think my heart would start acting up before I could even wish upon a star. The Academy's AC works without any care for patients, blasting cold air into the room. I crack open an eye to glance at Xavier. It's only then I realize the cold isn't coming from the AC. A single movement from our eyes could break this silence. I haven't thought of how to explain myself yet, so I turn my back to him. I listen to the rattle of the medicine bottle in his hands. It rattles, and rattles, and rattles, and rattles. It's a little irritating, but soon enough, he puts it down with a clack. How long were you going to hide this from me, if you didn't faint in class today? Don't pretend to be asleep. I know you're awake. His tone is soft, but it makes it all the more difficult to avoid him. I turn around, deciding to face this head-on. Where do I start? I thought about how to answer this question. I can tearfully recount the story of my birth. Or I can say it's a rare birth defect and there's nothing we can do. I just never thought my words would turn into incomprehensible mush by the time they reached my mouth. I stumble through my explanation, and I don't even know if he understood any of it. I sit up on the bed, pretending to be patient as I wait for him to say something. What's protocore syndrome? He looks up at me, reading the label on the medicine bottle. It's probably a terminal illness that makes my heart weaker and weaker. Is there no cure? There is, but we need a special protocore. What kind? They say there's a protocore that can cure any illness. Xavier doesn't respond, but I can see his eyebrows scrunch up and his eyes dancing across the room. Phylos is huge. It'll take ages to find. Don't worry. I'll be alright for now. Because of the medicine. Besides, maybe a miracle might happen, and I'll be cured. I speak quickly, hoping to ease the tension. But when Xavier glances at me, he looks completely unfazed. Quietly, he turns to observe the sunset from the window. Then he looks back at me. Let's watch the meteor shower together. Chapter 5. Incineration. The late autumn wind blows away the last of the humid summer, carefree in its passing. It has almost been 24 hours since I last slept. I lie in bed, tossing and turning, unable to steady my restless heart. I can only wait for the darkened sky to light up again, and then wait for the brightened sky to darken once more. Then, my alarm rings in the early hours of the next morning. The train ride is bumpy. After it stops at the station, I'm still a long way from Sky Mirror's salt flat. As I walk, I go from a stroll to a run. Running across the moonlit slope and through the winding path. I finally see the mirror-like lake that's akin to a shard of a dream. And standing in the center of the flat, underneath the starry sky, is a familiar figure. This is the first time I've seen Xavier without his uniform. His figure is perfectly illuminated by the moonlight. I hurry to him, stepping into the water that doesn't even reach my ankles. Xavier turns, the breeze bringing a sweet, cool, refreshing scent reminiscent of the moonlight to me. He grabs my hand unexpectedly, taking me to the trestle bridge to sit. I sit with one leg over the other, swinging them over the edge. I remember something and begin to look around. Xavier sits down next to me. Then, as though he can read my mind, he says, "You don't have to check. They're not here." Truly? You got rid of them? Yes. I vaguely sense Xavier's gaze being a little evasive, but quickly his eyes become more brighter from the light reflected on the ground. Why are you thinking about others when you requested I watch the meteor shower with you? Before I can answer, a star flies across the salt flat's reflection. It's starting! Xavier and I look up at the sky at the same time. The dark, inky sky is illuminated by various colors. Clusters of stars light up the sky, one after the other, appearing and disappearing. It's as if only Xavier and I exist in the world, and only the two of us can see this meteor shower. I clasp my hands and make a wish. When I open my eyes, I see Xavier also doing the same thing. I ask what he wished for, but he shakes his head and says he can't tell me. We sit there, between heaven and earth, until the sky turns lilac. Then we stand up. Wait, I have something I want to give you. I hastily unzip my bag. I pull out a sword tassel with a star-shaped charm and hold it up to Xavier's face. He's shocked, then takes it from me. "Did you make this yourself?" he asks. "I did. I know it's sort of ugly, but looks good." He interrupts me and then hands the tassel back. "Can you help me put it on?" I smile at Xavier and put the tassel on his sword. I give one last look, full of longing, to the salt flat. I try to drag him back the way we came, but I notice he stopped moving. What's wrong? Xavier quietly stares at me. "Can I hug you?" "What?" Thinking I misheard him, I look into his eyes for confirmation. "Can I hug you?" He repeats himself. His tone is soft, fluttering into my ears like the wind. Before I can react, he takes a few steps closer and leans down to hug me, all in one motion, executed with calm precision. I'm stunned. Then my hands slowly climb up his back. So this is what it feels like to hug him. "Thank you. My wish came true," he whispers into my ear. "Next time there's a meteor shower, let's visit this place again." I nod. I wish time stopped at this moment, and I hope my wish can come true. But was this the price I had to pay for my selfishness? Ever since that night, which was the brightest point of my life, everything became fleeting, fading like a shooting star. Chapter 6, Final Chapter, Stardust Trail. It's an awful disease. Ever since the meteor shower, I've only gotten more ill. My trips to the hospital became more and more frequent, until one day, I simply couldn't leave. It's nothing I didn't expect. It's just, I didn't expect it to be so soon. What actually surprised me was that I never saw Xavier again. He just disappeared without a trace. No one knew where he went. I tried to contact him, of course, but to no avail. 1, 2, 3 days passed, and I get more and more anxious. Just as I sneak out of my room, with barely enough strength to leave the hospital room, I recall what he said about how reaching for freedom is to give up. Did he lose his freedom when he went to watch the meteor shower with me? I lie on the hospital bed every day, tossing and turning, deep in thought, like the night before the meteor shower. But the sky doesn't light up any quicker with my dark thoughts. Likewise, no matter how much I think about Xavier, he doesn't appear. Even if I'm stupid, it's hard to miss the fact that my days are numbered. I can tell from the look on the nurse's face whenever she comes in. Besides, this withering heart is mine. Exactly 1 month after the meteor shower, I force myself to sneak out of the hospital and return to the salt flat, even if it's for that promise. I have a feeling he'll be there. It's amazing to hear the salt crunch beneath my feet. Despite it not being too long ago, I was able to run and jump the last time that I was here. I sit on the trestle bridge for a long time, longer than I did on that night that I watched the meteor shower with Xavier. After all, there is no next time. Just as I prepare to leave, I see a star reflected in the distance. It hangs on the pommel of a wooden sword, swinging this way and that. It's Xavier, and he's running. To me. He stops in front of me. It is only then that I notice the wounds on his hands and face. Catching his breath, he holds out his hand, showing me a small, glowing protocore. This is the first time he's looked at me with desperation in his eyes. When he moves closer, I notice a ring of light around his neck. It's a striking, suffocating red. Did you exchange your freedom for this? He doesn't answer. He says this is the protocore that can save me. He found it. But this withering heart is still in me. It's a flickering candle, about to go out at any moment. Holding on by only my desire to see Xavier again, I reach out and touch the wounds on his face. Some of the blood has already dried. I don't understand why Xavier, so calm and clever, would risk his life without a thought. He's willing to dive headfirst into danger for this dying heart of mine. It's too late. I want to touch Xavier's neck, but I only grab air. Return the protocore to where you found it. All right? Xavier doesn't say anything. He clutches the protocore until his knuckles turn white. You promised we would watch the meteor shower again. We have our own destinies. Some things can't be forced. I reach out and poke the corner of his mouth. Don't be sad. I've been very happy this past month. I don't know why, but even though I don't want to cry, tears begin to fall just as I finish speaking. Xavier wipes them away. Around us, the mirror-like salt flat connects heaven and earth, making the sky seem so boundless. At the same time, it makes us feel so small. Talk to me. I point at the space beside me, letting him sit a little closer. His gaze softens. After a while, he relaxes his grip on the protocore, letting it fall to the ground, and sits beside me. If I wasn't sick, would you watch the stars with me? Yes. Xavier puts an arm around me, letting me lean into his shoulder. Not just the stars. I'll show you the mountains and rivers, the sun and the moon. We'll see them together. Okay, but not the mountains. Hiking is a lot of work. I don't want to. No matter what happens, I'll be by your side. And no matter how long you rest, I'll wait for you. Alright, since you insist, I'll just have to agree. Leaning on Xavier's shoulder and dreaming of a disease-free future makes me happy. I feel my strength gradually disappearing. I use whatever I have left to look up at the sky. It's a shame there are no stars tonight. There is one. I see him hold out his hand in front of me, his palm glowing. It's like that time in the auditorium, but tonight, the light seems brighter. His shooting star is shining for me again. I close my eyes and whisper my final wish. I wish to meet you in my next life. I wonder if that will come true. It will. He holds my hand. It's nice and warm. I nod reassuringly at him, and then I feel as if though someone is calling my name from above. My eyelids feel heavy. Then, I can't open them anymore. In the final moments of my life, I feel like I'm being held. I hear sounds similar to stars burning in the sky, one after the other, as if another brilliant, grand meteor shower has appeared. With the scent reminiscent of the moon, A warm, gentle voice reaches my ears like a shooting star. No matter how many times it takes, no matter where you are, I will find you.